Welcome back to America Decides. A recent report from the American Immigration Council found that mass deportations, as proposed by the incoming Trump administration, could have massive effects on the federal budget and possible damaging effects to the U.S. economy. This report found that a one-time operation to deport all undocumented immigrants in the United States could cost as much, or at least, $315 billion. Nevertheless, President-elect Trump believes the country, in his words, doesn't have a choice.
Is it your plan to deport everyone who is here illegally over the next 4 years?
Well, I think you have to do it, and it's a very tough thing to do. But you have to have, you have rules, regulations, laws. They came in illegally.
The executive director for the American Immigration Council, Jeremy Robbins, joins us now from Studio 57 in New York. Jeremy, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Break down that $315 billion number. Where did it come from? What are those costs?
Yeah, thank you, Major. Thanks for having me. The costs of this are staggering, and they come in about four principal buckets. First, we have to find the people who we're going to deport. We then have to go into communities to arrest them. We have to detain them while we figure out, are they people who should be deported? And then we have to send them home. Because let's be very honest, we right now are deporting hundreds of thousands of people, and we're doing that by focusing on violent criminals. So when you're talking about mass deportations, we're not talking about deporting violent criminals. You're talking about deporting people, the majority of whom have been here more than 15 years. The vast majority, almost all of whom are working or in school. And so we're going to have to go into communities and find people.
And your report talks about detention, facilities, costs, person power. Explain that.
So right now, we have about as much detention capacity to detain about 50,000 undocumented immigrants while they're being sent to awaiting their decisions to be deported or to be let in. If you're talking about deporting 13 million people, just think about what that scale is. If you look at every inmate in prison or jail in this country, you're talking about 1.9 million people. Now you're talking about 13 million people. We need to build new facilities. You need to staff them. It's expensive. Even if you did an open air facility that wasn't, and you think about the concerns of what that could be, they're hugely expensive. And so this report was actually quite conservative because we used the costs that we have to detain people now. But when you think about how expensive and difficult it is to build something of that magnitude that quickly, it's going to be enormous. The numbers we're talking about to deport all undocumented immigrants, if you took all that we spend in the entire world on cancer research, this is 18 times that. This is 79 years of funding Head Start, and again, not to deport violent criminals who we are already targeting for deportation. This is to deport a lot of people who have been in this country for decades, who are working, who are by and large law-abiding citizens, who happen to have come here illegally. And let me be very clear, we need to have a system where people are coming here legally, where we have control over who comes here and who doesn't, and we have a process of figuring out who those people are, and quickly. Right now, it takes 6 years for many people to figure out whether they can get their asylum. It needs to take months or weeks. We need a system that is real, but a large-scale deportation of this magnitude that would deport 4% of the entire population would have devastating economic impacts and be hugely expensive to undertake.
Jeremy, let's take on that economic impact at a different level. You know, when you go to a Trump rally, and we have done this with our embedded reporters, there's a perception among those in the Trump political base that most illegal or undocumented immigrants are wards of the state, that they're receiving some manner of government benefits in perpetuity. But your report talks about them as workers, them as taxpayers, and that if they were deported, quite separate from the cost of doing that, there would be an economic impact as well.
You did a great segment earlier this hour talking about how voters were really concerned about the economy and inflation, and that was the main issue driving people to the polls. If you look at our industries, our service industries, our agriculture industry, our hospitality industry, our construction industry, if you deport a massive part of that workforce, if you get rid of half the people who are working to pick our crops and bring vegetables and fruits to market, prices will get more expensive. If you think about how hard it is to build homes and why housing is so expensive, and you get rid of the roofers and other key workers in the construction industry, it is going to get more expensive to build homes. And then you think of the fact that if you get rid of 4% of the population who have massive, massive buying power, you're talking about 11 million people, about 13 million people who collectively have about $250 billion a year that they inject into this economy, that will have devastating impacts on Americans of all stripes.
Jeremy Robbins, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Major.